biggest factor that we knew when we were pitching the growth of this company, we knew we needed other ground floor partners. That with our vision, with our plan to scale quickly and to grow a company that served its clients well, that we were missing some skill sets. Tiffany and I came with some, but we were missing especially the overall Airbnb expertise.
Hi, Charles. Thank you so much for joining me today at Canadian Real Estate 101 podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thanks so much for inviting me, Supriya. This is going to be fun.
Yes, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. I have been following you on social media, and I am not sure how I actually got to your page or landed to your profile. But anyways, one of my investors, clients, I guess, has been working with you or has picked your brain on one of their projects. And that's how I was introduced to what amazing stuff you are doing with the Airbnb strategies and stuff. And I'm super excited to have you on today because I'm in regular touch with my listeners and audience. And when I mention about Airbnb arbitrage or just in general Airbnb, there is a lot of interest. So I am really excited to have you, and thank you so much for joining us today. I know summer was super busy for everybody and you were on a break, but I really appreciate your time today.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
Okay, so before we jump on to what you're doing, let's get to know a little bit about you, what your background has been, what your experience, skill set, and eventually we'll get on to how you got into this world.
Yeah, cool. Okay. So my wife, Tiffany, and I both worked at an investment firm, Edward Jones, for our first 11 years out of school. We've both been goal setters from day one, always trying to figure out, what our purpose is and making sure we are clear about that purpose and striving towards it. And I think pretty early on in our relationship, we realized that wealth creation allowed for achieving greater purpose. Whatever your purpose or goals were, that wealth creation provided that time, that freedom, and the resources to do more of what you want to do. And so for us, we want to have a big positive impact. We want to have time with friends and family, and we knew creating wealth was important. So we've always done that. We've lived beneath our means. We invested in stock portfolios and real estate. And so we've created wealth for ourselves, climbing the corporate ladder, if you will. We had high income jobs. And so last year, I think it kind of happened where we realized we are on track for our goals, but it was still looking like, it was going to be at least 10 more years that until we could, retire. And we just thought, well, hey, we don't want to just sit around for 10 years and just wait for it to happen. Is there something else we can be doing? Can we build something for ourselves? Can we give ourselves more freedom and choice today in leaving our 9 to 5? And what might that look like? And I think having a 1-year-old daughter at the time last year was a big part of that, realizing we wanted more time in our lives and how can we do it? And so
I think something shifts when stuff like that, like major milestones come in, right? As soon as you're either kid is in the picture, baby has come, or a sick relative, parent, or somebody like that. Unfortunately, something major has to happen for us, for our brains to kind of switch and start thinking in a different way. Otherwise, we can be as stagnant. We don't like change in general. Humans don't like change in general. But unfortunately, something major has to happen. Did you feel like sounds like it was a similar story in your case as well?
Yeah, you absolutely nailed it. It was a combination of a few things that really hit home. We'd been on such a focused path to create wealth and retire early. But these few things kind of happened all at once. The pandemic, some sick and relatives, some scary situations. And then, of course, having a 1-year-old through the pandemic, it was this massive realization, like, we only have this one life and we don't know when, our time will be. And we just want to make sure we're doing everything we can to live our best life the way we want to live it. And so that really prompted us to take a fresh look that are we on the right path, or do we want something a little different? And I think we just both realized at the same time, we don't want to be tied to a laptop working for someone else for another 10 or 15 years, that there must be something else out there. So that kind of sparked the the research, if you will, like, what might that look like? And then here we are.
I think pandemic was definitely not good in a lot of situations, but when in retrospect, when I think about it, I think it has also helped a lot of people get a lot more clarity in terms of life is short. What do I want to do? And
That's it.
I think it was sort of a pushing circumstance that a lot of people did take advantage of, either starting side hustle or thinking about life or what their purpose is, what they really want to do in a very different way.
Definitely. And like most things, as horrible and as challenging as it was in so many ways through the pandemic, there's usually a silver lining and some benefits to be taken away from those hard times. And I think certainly for us, that definitely happened.
Great. Okay. So, so that you started your research, and I think when I was speaking with you, there was a podcast that you heard, and that inspired you to make that decision. Which I'm curious to hear. What podcast was it?
Yeah, a big shout out here for the Andrew Hines podcast. Andrew's phenomenal. He does great things on and off the podcast. But that was the one that I was listening to.
Yes, it's a great podcast. I've listened to a few episodes myself, and there's a lot of content to learn from. And I'm so glad that you not only listened to it, but you were actually able to get inspired and take action from it.
Oh yeah, and that's really how it happened. We knew we wanted to explore a shift in our path, getting out of the 9 to 5, and a few options crossed my mind. We'd created decent wealth for ourselves at this point, so we had money sitting in the bank account that we could put to work. We were trying to figure out what that might look like. Be a full-time investor. I wasn't sure, and so listening to some real estate podcasts, because obviously we had a passion for real estate, and heard this podcast about arbitrage. And he actually had a couple of them, one from quite a while ago and one more recently. And as soon as I heard two different people share they had success, like the numbers worked, and this was a successful venture for them in the same location in Ontario, that was it. Like as soon as I finished the podcast, I pretty much said to myself, this is it. I can do this. We're going to do this. And that kind of kickstarted the next steps.
So was Tiffany on board with that, or was she hesitant? What were her thoughts?
Oh, geez. Yeah, great question. I would say she was fully supportive. I would say at first when I first listened to it, I thought, well, I would start to build this as a side hustle, to explore it some more, to get a few properties under our belt, see if it made sense, see if it was working, and then I would quit and do it full time. And then the plan was maybe if Tiffany wanted to join at some point, she would. So this was all in October when I heard this podcast, and we were having these early conversations. And essentially what happened is I started waking up at 4:00 every morning before my day job and spending 4 hours or so every morning on research, kind of building out what this company might look like, what I needed, just kind of building that foundation and doing the research. And I was networking in the evenings with real estate investors to share this idea, et cetera, et cetera. And I guess just the way it happened in the following 4-6 weeks or so, it became more and more clear that this was going to be a all hands on deck type of effort, a go all in and do this full time or don't do it. That's really what it was for us. And so then we did some more research to see, okay, like, are we going to do this? And then ultimately we had the confidence to both quit. And I would say at that point, there was some hesitancy for sure. We talked to our family, some mentors and friends, and really just kind of shared where we're at and what we're thinking. We were both hesitant, but I think the answer became more and more clear, like, we need to do this. There's no real risk. Worst case scenario, we leave our jobs. This doesn't work out. There'll always be more jobs. And we just thought we had to shake that fear of failure, shake that fear of change, and just both quit. And we did. We quit the same company pretty much a week apart. And that's how it all happened. But by then, Tiff was all on board, ready to do this with me.
Oh, that's great. So a few key takeaway points that I'm kind of picking up from here is, I think, yes, fear does come in our way, but if we make decisions out of faith, then ultimately, things do work out. because things will be thrown at you no matter what. That it doesn't matter which level of business you are at. When you're starting off, different kind of problem solving versus when you're in year 5, 6, 7, 8, it's a different kind of problem solving that you're doing because you're expanding all the time, right? So I think if you're taking that decision from the space of faith, I trust myself, I trust universe, and this is going to work out. We'll make it happen. Worst case scenario, in 1 year, 2 year, whatever the timelines might be, we can always go back to the regular 9 to 5. There's nobody stopping us doing that. But I think the kind of expansion that you get over the hustling, over the trying phase, is what you eventually become, and that's where the expansion happens. That's where the growth happens, and that's where and when you seeing the results ultimately, right?
Well, that's it. And as humans, though, just kind of the way we're built, we are naturally, scared of any change and fear of failure. And so we are so limited in our thinking and in our pursuits in life because of fear of the risks and of change. And I think for us, it was really diving into that fear of what are we actually afraid of. And I think when you spend the time actually diving in and reflecting on what you're scared about, you realize that there's nothing really to be scared of. And because people were hearing us and we're both about to quit our high-paying jobs, we've been there for 11 years. Why would we do that? And I think once we explored the why not is when it became so obvious. We couldn't come up with a single reason as to why not, because really it sounds risky. And that's what I keep hearing. Well, isn't that a huge risk for you guys to quit? And I kind of asked the question back, like, is it like, and what is the risk that you see? And the reality, there wasn't one. The biggest risk is it didn't work out. We fully fail and flop. And then the reality is we get jobs again and explore what's next for us. And so we just knew, frankly, the worst case scenario is that we're going to learn and grow and be challenged. And if that's all that came from it, this was still the right decision. So we knew there was no wrong decision here in quitting. It was time for us to try something new and maybe fail. And that was going to be okay as well.
And I think that's the kind of mindset that you have to go with. You can't go with an expectations, oh, I'm going to make $1 million out of it, or whatever the number could be. The mindset needs to be, I'm going to give it a try. I'm going to give it my best. And worst case, I'm going to grow out of it, learn new things. And whatever happens, it will happen regardless.
That's it. Now, don't get me wrong. We went in with expectations, goals, and they were audacious. So we don't mess around with our goal setting. And so we had plans to have some significant success. But we knew that if those plans fell short, that all was going to be okay and we'd still be better for it. And so that gave us that confidence to pull the trigger.
Excellent. Okay. So after 4, 6 weeks, you quit your job. What happens next?
Yeah. Okay. So I'd say right before we quit our job. So a key piece that helped us do that was having done the research, of course, on what this was going to look like. And the biggest factor that we knew when we were pitching the growth of this company, we knew we needed other ground floor partners. That with our vision, with our plan to scale quickly and to grow a company that served its clients well, that we were missing some skill sets. Tiffany and I came with some, but we were missing especially the overall Airbnb expertise. That is that's a steep learning curve if you're talking about doing it at scale. And so we knew that if we were going to do this well, we needed 2 other partners, or at least 1 other partner who can come in with deep expertise, who also shared our mindset and vision for growth, who would really build this company with us. And so we went out hunting, and that was my evenings after my day job, is where I went out networking and kind of interviewing without people realizing that that's what I was doing. I was just kind of curious what was out there. And actually, relatively early on in that search, one of my first meetings was with Tracy. It was Airbnb Simplified on Instagram. And it was with her and her partner. And they were on a similar path. They're much younger kids, really, 27 or so. Just the most impressive people I've ever met, really. She's a CPA, he's a CFA, but so much more than that. And both climbing the corporate ladders as well, pretty fast. But they've just brought so much of everything, deep knowledge and skill sets of Airbnb and how to manage and run it effectively to optimize performance. But it was even more than that. It was their mindset to build something special, that they already had that in place at such a young age. And so she was already planning to quit her job to start an Airbnb management business, not necessarily arbitrage, but she was going to start managing Airbnbs for clients. And then when we met each other, it became pretty obvious, with Tracy and I, that we were almost two sides of the same coin, that Tiffany and I brought significant capital and a vision that aligned very closely with what Tracy was looking for. But we were missing a lot of the operational skill sets, and we didn't want to spend the time learning that if our strengths were elsewhere. And so Tracy was the other side of the coin, same mindset, same vision, but all the skill sets that we didn't have. And so a number of conversations later, we realized we're going to build this company together, and we're going to build it fast. And so I think having the confidence, we got the confidence to quit when we found Tracy, because we realized, okay, we have the dream team here. We have everything we need to build this company. And then we had some leads on some properties, and that was it. We quit, Tiffany and I, before we even launched our first Airbnb. We just had a few leads in the pipeline. We had Tracy and her partner, and the four of us were ready to go. And so we submitted our resignation.
That's excellent. That's a great story. Thanks for sharing that. Now, for our listeners who do not know, what is Airbnb arbitrage? Like, how does it work? Do you want to give a high-level bird's view of what it really is? What does it do?
Yeah, good point. So, Airbnb arbitrage is essentially where you are leasing the property from a real estate investor or property owner. You essentially become their tenant and property manager. So you are, from a tenant perspective, you are paying the monthly rent and utilities, and you're responsible for keeping the place in pristine condition. And so we're the tenant, and then we also manage the property for that investor. So anything, lawn maintenance, garbage removal, snow removal, any ad hoc maintenance needs, we're responsible for managing all that. And then what we do is we take that empty property and we invest in staging it and getting it ready for Airbnb. And we run our Airbnb out of real estate investors' properties, if that makes sense. And our operating profit is the revenue that we bring in above the expenses that we're paying to the landlord, above the rent and utilities.
Okay, excellent. So let's take an example let's take a random example. So say, for example, you lease from a real estate investor, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath property somewhere. Pick a location. Where would you want to pick a location?
Yeah, sure. Hamilton, let's say.
Hamilton. Okay. So you would rent for, say, $2,500, if that sounds reasonable, and you're responsible for paying the utilities, internet, and making sure the lawn is clean and shoveled, or grass is cut and it's in pristine condition. Then you basically sublease it, or you run the Airbnb, system on that property. And whatever is made after paying that $2,500 plus utilities plus cleaning and everything, that's your profit, your operating profit at the end of the day, right?
That's exactly right. Yes. And so generally speaking, the numbers for the Ontario market, of course, rents keep going up. But generally speaking, we would look to call it a 3-bedroom property in Hamilton might cost us about $15,000 or so to stage it. So that's our upfront investment into acquiring a new arbitrage property, $15,000 or so. And we would look to make, call it roughly $15,000 net profit for the year. So after we've paid the landlord all the rent utilities, and we paid for our other, cleaning and ad hoc expenses, we look to make about $15,000. So 100% return on that initial investment in the first year.
Okay. All right. Got it. Now, next is your first property, where was it? If you want to go through some numbers, and what was the vacancy rate, how long you've had it for? Do you want to touch upon that a little bit, just so we have a case study for us?
Yeah, sure. So we moved really quickly in the beginning with intent, and I'll share more about that intent a little bit later. But we essentially launched, this is going to sound crazy, but it was, I think, 18 units which was, I think, 12 properties. Some of them were duplexes, so 12 properties, 18 total units in the first 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and they were in multiple cities. And so it was wild. We were trying to coordinate local teams to stage these places in multiple cities all at once. And I would say that they were very average properties. They weren't anything that we thought were going to perform extremely well necessarily. But the goal really was to establish a portfolio, a business, and the learning that came from it. And so I think those properties today, so they're in Hamilton, Windsor, London were some of our first ones, and Kitchener. I think we're launching across those 4 cities all at once. And they all perform relatively well. They're not as well as some of the more recent ones we've acquired, but I think they're all looking to make about 10,000 plus for the year.
Okay, that sounds pretty reasonable. And this is going to be a different question, but I was very curious to understand, how does the insurance work in Airbnb arbitrage model? Because my understanding, or at least I would think, that you would need to get a different kind of insurance to protect from short-term rentals and stuff like that. How does that work?
Yeah, so for most of our core properties, which are standard rental properties in suburban or cities, but fairly basic properties, we're exclusively on Airbnb, because Airbnb provides phenomenal insurance coverage. And so it's up to $1 million USD of both damage and liability. They pay out very quickly, and we haven't had any issues with any claims for any damage whatsoever. And so the Airbnb coverage is automatic. Once you've registered your property in Airbnb, you are covered for all damage and liability to the property from guests. And then the owner of the property maintains standard property insurance for a rental property. They have a long-term lease in place with us. So the property insurance they have is standard. It covers all damage unrelated to guests. So a tree falls on the house, or lightning strikes, or there's a flood in the city, they're covered through their property insurance with their provider. If anything happens to the property as a result of guests, Airbnb is the coverage.
Okay, excellent. And how do you look for which locations you should be getting the leases on? Like, what is some checklist or some criteria, some fundamentals that you keep in mind while you're doing the research?
Yeah, it's relatively straightforward, to be honest. We're really looking for 2 major things. We want to understand the regulations in a given municipality or location, to understand their stance on short-term rentals, and the regulations that are required to run our short-term rentals. So we just want to understand them. I wouldn't say that if there's regulations we avoid the location. It's just making sure we understand the overall stance and what those regulations are. It's just an important factor there. And then the second criteria is really just the financials. And so we're really just looking for 2 things there. The average rent for a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom. That is our major overhead. And then the other is the Airbnb demand or revenue that we can expect. So just those 2 numbers, the biggest overhead number for our expense, and our primary revenue number, which is the Airbnb payouts. And so it's not too difficult to check in on a city and run our numbers manually to check what those average rents are, and build essentially a financial model that shows for any given city, here's the average rents for a different size property, and here's the average revenue that we can expect on Airbnb. And it's those ratios that call out, whether a location is above average on the financial performance, or average or below. And that's how we make our decisions.
Is there any system or any kind of website that helps you estimate, how much this property can be rented for? Or what the vacancy rate is to be expected for these locations? Or you just make different scenarios and see worst, best, middle scenario, which one would be the best?
Yeah, we prefer to run our numbers manually. It doesn't take that long to do, and we believe it's way more accurate, especially with the financial expertise of our 4 co-founders. And so we are all deep financial experts, ranging from CPA, CFA, CIM, CFP. That is all of our background. And so we have the confidence that we can build our own manual database, essentially, that gives us way more accurate information. AirDNA exists. A lot of people use it. We just find that the information it provides isn't really relevant. It takes the averages of everything. And as we know, the averages of Airbnb, I mean, you're getting properties that were just launched and it's averaging it out for the year. You're getting properties that are only being used as Airbnb for parts of the year. And yet it's, again, making it look like it's running full time as an Airbnb. You don't know otherwise. It gets a bunch of mom and pops who don't know how to properly run an Airbnb. And so essentially the data you're looking at is really not very helpful, to be honest, on any of these systems. You need to go and do the research yourself, but it's also not that hard to do.
Got it. Okay. Now, moving along, in your first 6 weeks, 8 weeks, you acquired quite a few of properties under this model. Now, what were some learnings out of it, if you recall? Like what worked, what didn't work, what you could have done differently, and what are you doing something different as of today? What would you recommend? What are your thoughts on that?
Geez, that's a biggie.
It's a loaded question,
but no, it's a good one, and we'll have lots of back and forth on it. There's so much. So yeah, let's dive in. I'll start with call it the 3 things that come to mind on what we did really well that set us apart. We've achieved phenomenal success over our first 9 months, more so than anyone has in this space before, we believe. And I think it comes really down to 3 things. The first I touched on a little bit. It's finding those ground floor partners, the co-founders of your company, that you are really coming to this business with the diversified skill sets and strengths that are needed to build this company. And so that has set us apart. Having 4 co-founders with very different skill sets, the needed skill sets to build this company is the absolute difference maker. It's by far the number one reason we've been successful. And I would encourage others to consider, for something this big, arbitrage is very complicated. There's lots of moving pieces. To start with a partner, find at least one other person who shares this vision with you, and get them on board and do this together. Don't do this alone. There's too much involved. So that's number one. The second reason we were so successful, and this is a really important one, and I think for the most part, people misunderstand this about arbitrage. Building an arbitrage company is just that. It is a company. This is not a real estate investment strategy. This is so important. I feel like almost everyone I speak with is missing that. A lot of them are real estate investors who are interested in arbitrage, and so they're seeing it as another way to diversify their portfolio or diversify their investment strategy. And I would just strongly encourage these people to really look at what this is and what it's not. So if you think of an investment, at the highest level, an investment is where you're putting your money to work for you. That's the idea. It's, generally speaking, passive. And so you're finding the right investment, and that's where the due diligence is needed, the skill sets. You're going to analyze the investment. Does it make sense for you? The risks, liquidity, expected return on investment. These are the factors you'll consider. You'll run the finances, and then you'll make a decision to invest. But once you do, that money works for you. That's the idea of investing. With a company, and building a company like arbitrage you have to approach it entirely differently. You are working for you. Your money isn't, you are working. You need diversified skill sets. It's a steep learning curve. And the biggest and most important factor, you have clients. And so you need to be entering into this business and realize, okay, I'm going to build a company. And if you're doing that and you have clients, you need to be thinking about how are you going to deliver better value to your clients than anyone else. And that changes the decisions that you make from day one. You're not making them based on individual investment decisions into these properties. You're thinking about the steps it takes to build a company and deliver value to your clients. And you need to constantly be thinking about how you can deliver more and better value to those clients. So we had that understanding going in. And that's actually what I touched on. So with our first properties, so just as a for instance of how you think differently if you're building a company, everyone's looking at their first arbitrage property and trying to find that perfect one that's going to make X dollars. And they're asking, how quickly will I get my money back on this first property? And I realized right away that that's not the right way to go about this. And so when we went in, we knew that we were going to invest, whatever it was, 100,000, 200, maybe more, 300,000 into building a company. And so what that meant was we needed clients, and we needed to learn, and we needed to grow, and that we need to deliver value to these clients. So we essentially launched 18 properties They were average, and actually a lot of them were below average. But what that did to springboard the success was just so important. And if you get caught up on the individual investment side of things, I think you're missing the bigger picture.
I think you have to look at the overall portfolio from what I'm hearing from you, that you do learn from specific investments or specific leases that you have, so specific properties that you have. But when you look at the overall portfolio, you're able to apply that to your next arbitrage, to your next purchase, not purchase. I'm so used to saying purchase. To your next lease or to your next property that you're going to analyze on. Right?
Yeah. Learnings was massive. So that was called one of the factors of moving so quickly, that we wanted lots of properties fast so we can get the learning. Like we want, the more we acquired, the faster we would learn and the better we would get at identifying properties, managing them, etc. But the other major factor was knowing that we needed to deliver value to clients to create a brand and reputation that would allow other people to learn about the value we bring. And again, this is back to the company mindset, that if you're building a company and delivering value to clients, that's what's going to achieve your success long-term, not the finances, it's not the numbers. And so essentially what we did is from day one, we built a brand that said, we're going to deliver value to you as the real estate investor. Our goal is to make sure that real estate investing becomes completely passive for you and that you have full peace of mind on your rental property, because we're leasing the property and you're going to get your rent on time and your property is going to be in pristine condition always. And by creating that value proposition and focusing really all of our energy on delivering that value to our investors, what happened was we only had to, call it, pitch our value to our first, 8 or 10 or 12 properties or units. Once we had done that already and had proven success in delivering value to clients, not proven success on the finances, that doesn't even mean anything at this early of a company. It's proven success in delivering value to who your client is. That's what created all our success. And so we went out there in the beginning and we just took any property we can get in order to prove our value to those clients. I almost didn't even care about the finances. Truly, I went in saying, if we didn't make a return on any of these first 10 properties, it would still be worth the investment into creating these clients and showing that we can deliver value to them as clients. And then sure enough, what happened was we delivered value to those clients so well that so quickly, with only 10 or 12 clients, word of mouth, and then our podcast went out. We have so many people reaching out to us, asking us to lease their property with this model. We haven't had to pitch to a client since like March, I think, and it was only 4 months after our business started. And so it's really just having that mindset that if you focus on delivering value to your clients, the success will come and the right learnings will come, and that the finances take care of themselves. We already knew that people were running arbitrage successfully in Ontario. That was enough for me to know. AirBnB and others the numbers worked. And so I didn't have to overthink the numbers. We needed to focus on delivering value to clients and know that was going to springboard a rapid success.
Okay, so a couple of clarifications or confirmations that I want. Just to be clear, by clients, you mean real estate investors who are ready to give your property for lease on this model. It's not really the clients who you are subleasing on that Airbnb platform who are coming for short-term rental. So that's not the client that we are referring to. We are referring to the clients that are giving their property to you to put the arbitrage model on their property, correct?
Correct. That's mostly been what I've been talking about to this point. But your clarifying question is an important one, because we have two sets of clients with this business, and our focus needs to be on how we can continue to be better on both. So we have the one client, the real estate investor who we're leasing their property from. We need to deliver value to them so that they tell others about what we offer and how special it really is. So that's client number one. Client number two is all of our guests. And our focus is on how can we get better at delivering a better guest experience for all of our properties, for everyone who is staying. What makes a better guest experience and how do we do it better? And then on the flip side, for all these real estate investors, how can we make their real estate investing experience better? What does that look like? And by asking those questions and constantly looking to improve the value to both sets of our clients, the success of our company is inevitable. Whereas most investors who think of this as a real estate investment strategy, they're not thinking about clients at all, that they're only focused on the numbers, which are only a small piece, and it's limiting their growth and success because they're just focused on the wrong thing.
Okay, great. Now, we have discussed about giving value to your clients, which is the real estate investor. Let's expand on that. What kind of value are you providing to these investors? Why are they coming to you? What are you doing differently that they wouldn't give the rental to, say, for example, a young family who will be keeping it long term and reduces the hassle of, the arbitrage, because it does come with some risk. So what is that value that you're providing that investors are willing to proceed with you?
Yeah, and I think this is ultimately why this concept, this business model resonated with me right away when I heard it. It was that there's a problem or an obstacle that all real estate investors face. And we've been real estate investors for a long time with long-term tenants. And one of the biggest challenges of building a real estate portfolio, of building your real estate empire, if you will, one of the biggest challenges is the tenant and property management aspect. Going out and finding and vetting the right tenants. And then even still, once you do, you don't know what you're going to get. And we've all heard and experienced some horror stories of having those bad tenants, as well as the property manager. So what we look to do and the value we aim to provide is to remove that challenge and obstacle, that we become, rather than just a tenant, we become a partner for their business that allows the real estate investor to focus on what they do best and what they want to do, which is to build their portfolio. They get to focus on acquiring properties, knowing that they're going to lease their property to, Charles Tracy and team, and that we are going to keep the property in pristine condition, and that they're going to collect the rent from us every time, and that it's the same tenant and property manager for all their properties. And so all of a sudden their brain starts to spin, like, if we don't have to worry about tenants and property management, if I have a partner in the business who fills those roles of paying me rent and managing the property, I think it happens very quickly where they realize this is a solution that they've been looking for and didn't realize existed. And that's been the main reason.
That's great, because a lot of our investors do not want to deal with tenants and toilets. Right. That's why
it.
strategies like Airbnb arbitrage, that's why rent to own strategies are working very well in this market.
Sure.
And another caveat or another thing that to consider is landlord tenant regulations in Ontario are not the best. Like, we can, if you get a bad tenant, figure out a way how to get them out. Unfortunately, it's not an easy battle to win, and courts are always, in majority of the cases, they are taking stance of the tenants, unfortunately, even if, landlord is great. And we are experiencing that in our personal experience as well, where we have a very long-term tenant, but unfortunately, for whatever reason, it's just not working out. And, we are trying to find alternatives in that situation. But nevertheless, these are some of the negative sides of giving to a regular professional tenant. That's the term.
That's and you've probably
professional tenant.
Right. Yeah, fair enough. Well, and I think you touched on the biggest risk. So right away there's the obvious simplicity of working with us, that there isn't, and you're not taking any real risks. You don't having to vet these tenants. You're not having to deal with the property management or tenant issues whatsoever. You hand the property over to us, and we fill those roles immediately and better than anyone else. And you called the biggest risk out, which is the scenario where you think you have a good tenant, something happens, and it could have been well intentioned in the beginning, but something happens with that tenant, or in that tenant's life, where they are no longer paying rent and they're not leaving. In worst case scenario, they're even not respecting the property. And so now you have someone in there who's damaging the property, who isn't paying rent, won't leave. And of course, the laws in Ontario and Canada, as you know, favor that tenant. And so if that's the biggest risk, that isn't completely unavoidable, and we just eliminate that risk, because if even if you think about it logically, we're not a tenant. We act as the tenant by paying the rent, but we're a business partner, and so it would never, that just situation would never occur, right? If our business isn't going successfully, ultimately we're going to work with that landlord to find another tenant and vacate it's in our best interest to keep the property in pristine condition, pay our rent to our clients, and so it's not a realistic scenario.
Okay, great. Now, moving along, do you want to touch upon how an investor can work with you either on active scenario, if they want to be actively involved with you or your business, and then also a lot of them don't have too much time, so they might want to be passively involved with what you're doing. Do you want to touch upon both the aspects?
Yeah, sure. So I would say on the passive side, we're looking for potential money partners, mostly through private lending is how we would work with our passive investors. Our company is growing quite quickly. We have very strong margins, and there's just a great opportunity to invest with our growth there. So that's on the passive side. It could also be that they are looking to invest in high-end properties and have the mortgage approvals, they have the capital, and so they're actually going to buy a property where we're coming in together. They'll be mostly the money and the mortgage approval. We will run the Airbnb, and there's lots of partnership opportunities there. So that's kind of the passive side. On the active side, we weren't looking for partners so much to be active with us locally. We feel like we have all the teams that we need, and we didn't see an opportunity really for active partners with us. But now as we look to expand into other locations, either other provinces or other countries, we know we are going to be looking for partners who are local and can handle the physical needs of the property. And so our competitive advantage, our unfair advantage as a company, is our 4 co-founders and the skills we bring, and they're mostly on the virtual management side. It's on acquiring these properties, it's on managing those listings, price optimization, everything that can really be done virtually. Where we're average and really don't want to be spending as much time as we are is on the physical management of our property. So if we're going to expand in a new location, it would be great to have an active partner who's really responsible to lead all of the property management needs of all of our properties, from snow removal, lawn maintenance, garbage removal, everything local. If there's any ad hoc maintenance needs, meeting landlords, seeing properties, everything that it can be done better when you're physically there. I think that's where we're looking for some active partners.
Okay. In terms of your company's vision, do you want to be within Canada itself, like going outside of Ontario, or would you want to expand in US or other countries as well eventually?
Yeah, our plan is to be global, and we don't expect it to take that long, frankly. We've already expanded across Canada. We're in 3 provinces now and exploring a 4th and a 5th. But we also think the bigger opportunity is outside of Canada. Some in the US, there's some pockets there that we're exploring, but we're looking all over. We're currently exploring an opportunity in Melbourne, Australia, for instance. So nothing's off the table. The way this world works these days, really you can copy and paste your business model just about anywhere pretty easy as long as you have the right partners.
World is yours, oyster, and you can definitely make a lot of opportunities out there. You just need to be on lookout for them and be open to them. So great.
That's it.
Perfect, Charles. Now, any wrap-up comments, anything that you'd like to share that perhaps I missed to ask you, or you want to include your thoughts, your final wrapping up comments?
Well, I guess to those, looking to, do something new, to get out of that 9 to 5, consider this arbitrage business model. As we just mentioned, like the world's a big place and there's so much opportunity in this space. And it's just started, right? Short-term rentals are relatively a new concept. And as the world becomes even more global with more travel as it will, this opportunity isn't going anywhere. And now's the time. And we're regular people who had day jobs, and all of a sudden now we have this large and growing business, and we're having a lot of fun. So if you're thinking about it, get in there and feel free, reach out, send us a DM on Instagram, connect, and see if this is something that works for you. So that'd be one. And then on the other side, to all those real estate investors out there, no matter where you are, feel free, reach out to understand more about what we do and the value we add, and we'll see if there's an opportunity to partner.
Great. What's your social media handles? Where can they DM you?
Yeah, so for now, Tiffany and I are at Crompton_elite_REI. And our partners, Tracy and her partner, they're at AirBnB Simplified. And so you can follow us along there. And hopefully at some point we'll have the chance to connect.
Yeah, we'll have that contact information, the Instagram handles on the show notes as well. While we're wrapping up, thank you so much for your time today. This was very enlightening, something that I was always curious to understand how it works, but I had no idea. I haven't even listened to any podcast about it, to be quite honest. I've been focusing on my content here, but
fair enough.
Nevertheless, great concept. I wish you luck, and we shall definitely be in touch.
Thanks, Supriya. All the best. Bye for now.